we will start. So again, welcome everyone for joining the webinar today. We are going to address a very, very important topic, which is not talked about that much, but it's a topic that many of us, if not all, have experienced. It's something that is important to talk about. It's something that is very important to share perspectives on. And it's called imposter syndrome, which translates to having the feeling of being a fraud or not deserving one's success despite a track record of successes and achievements. And especially in the AI and data science field, there is a lot happening, especially in recent years, as you know, and there's a lot of competition happening. Many people are entering the field. It's a very complex, it's a very broad field. And we all, as people working in this field, we need to find our own path. And I was listening to a YouTube video from Lex Fridman. I think some of you know who Lex Fridman is. He's an MIT researcher. He's also a very popular YouTuber. And he shared his learnings on the imposter syndrome and how he had these thoughts coming up and how he dealt with it. And what he said is that we have to find our own path. We have to pave our own path. Because if we embark on our own path, then there is less need to compare ourselves. Then we understand that in the end, we have a different background, we have different circumstances, we are all individuals, and we have our own path that we have to take. And the only thing that counts is to compare ourselves with the person that we were yesterday, a year ago, 5 years ago, and so on. And when we do that, then we realize that there is always progress and that we always move forward. And in this webinar, we want to talk about this topic and we want to share perspectives. And we have 3 people sharing their perspectives on how they experienced imposter, how they dealt with it. And after that, what we will do is we will do a Q&A session. So you can join in, you can ask your questions, and we can learn from each other. So we will start now. And if you want, you can take notes, you can write down your questions, because at the end, we will talk about the questions that you might have along the way. And now I want to give the stage to Coulsons. Coulsons, you can join in. Coulsons will be the first person who will share her experiences. So welcome, Coulsons.
Let's see, for briefly, oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone, okay, great.
So first question, Coulsons, can you introduce yourself a little bit? What is your background?
Sure, so my name is Coulsons Abdullah, and briefly about my background, I studied in the United States, and I ended up doing my PhD within the computer electrical engineering degree. My focus at that time was on network security and using visualization on the data. I discovered data science after that, and I got very interested in that and machine learning. So I picked up skills that I didn't have, and I started getting into that work. And so now, fortunately, I'm working as a data scientist.
For how long have you been working as a data scientist now?
See, roughly about 6 years. The previous company I was at for 4 years. Before that was about 2, and I recently started a month ago at a new company.
So 6 years, which is quite a long time. Can you go back a bit and share a bit about your experiences in the first couple of years when you entered the field?
Oh, sure. So at that time when I learned about data science, I think it was kind of just becoming a bit popular. but not fully. And there were resources available on the internet, doctoring, of course, being one of the most famous ones. There were definitely not as much as today and as much popularity as there was now. So I remembered having some challenge trying to get, say, curated information. It was very overwhelming for what I should try to focus on to learn. And then by doing some work hands-on and going about things a bit the hard way, then I started to kind of get the hang of what I was interested in, what I needed to learn. I do remember having to pick up things like, say, Python, R. I had not used them before. I wasn't very strong in statistics at the time because I didn't have that in my academic background. So there was some new, challenging yet kind of scary, but exciting at the same time, I could say.
So when you say there were challenges, how did you deal with this information overload? And especially in the beginning, when you enter a new field, there is not really proof of work, right? There's not really an outcome. So you have to enter a new field, you have to study a lot, you have to connect to people, you have to ask questions. So how was that for you, and how did you deal with these challenges? Were there certain techniques that you had? How did it work?
So for me, at the beginning, I remembered when I first started to get a chance working in it, and I say this in retrospect, I noticed that I was either in some positive environments that were constructive, but I was also in a very toxic environment. And what I mean by toxic is where, since I already had, self-doubt and confidence issues, and I felt like I didn't know everything I needed to know to be able to work in this field, and not realizing that it's a journey and in a marathon, it's a learning process, is that unfortunately, there were people I was surrounded by that were, egotistical. I realized that they would look down on me and doubt my skills. And I didn't realize that there was something wrong with that. I thought there was something wrong with me. And it took a while for me to realize that was not good. So what I had to do for myself was to be able to figure that out, that wasn't a good environment. It wasn't my fault. And to make sure that I found a community, whether it was online or in real life, if I could, of people that were, that were positive, that gave me constructive criticism, and they would give me guidance. And I think that helped me, say, dealing with what I probably had been having as imposter syndrome, and also being able to filter out all of the information that was available and what I could focus on to improve myself, because you can't learn everything, and it's a process, and there's a part of figuring out, I think I still do this today, is figuring out, well, what do I need to learn, or what do I want to learn? What's the best use of my time, since I can't learn everything? And it helps me to check in with people that actually want me to succeed, and they want to help me in that and get their feedback.
How important is it from your perspective to talk about the topic of maybe imposter, or just having certain feelings and having certain thoughts? How important do you think is this to bring this inner dialogue out? Is that something that you practiced?
Yes, I try to do that as much as I can. And I think part of it is because, especially due to my experience at that time, if someone had told me these things, or they let me know about imposter syndrome or what I was going through, it would have been much easier for me. And if I can help it, I don't want others to have to go through this, because it's a shame. We're all talented. We all have our strengths. And for something like that to make you not learn and to have progress, I guess I could say I'm really an advocate for people being able to talk about it and realize it and to be able to overcome it.
So you said that it limits you to make progress, right?
Yes.
Because in the end, you have this inner dialogue going on, you have these doubts going on, instead of actually doing what you want to do, right? Is that
Right.
something that happened to you as well, that that there was a blockage of two opposing voices that kept you from actually investing into what you're truly passionate about, what you truly enjoy doing, right? And is there something that you applied to get over this?
So first was, I think, which I didn't have firstly, let's say, was I didn't recognize that this dialogue was happening internally. And so because I didn't realize it was happening, I had to really struggle in order to keep pushing myself, to keep learning, and to keep trying. Once I could be able to identify this was negative dialogue and to say, okay, you know, I have this negative self-talk going on, and to be able to logically go through it and say, you know what, this isn't right. I'll acknowledge, yes, I have these feelings, that's okay. But think about all that I've done, all my progress, all my hard work. And by doing that, I think it made me be able to be much more productive than I could have been when I didn't recognize it.
So the first step is really to name it, right? To label it.
Mm-hmm.
And to acknowledge that it's there and bring a certain awareness and attention towards it. And
definitely, and finding ways to say, just to figure out, okay, this is happening to me. What can I do? What can I try to help myself? Because it could take some time, but being patient with yourself, I think.
So if we go a step further, you wrote a very nice article with another Omdena collaborator, and you gave 8 tips on dealing and overcoming imposter syndrome. What has for you been the most important tip or technique that you would have liked to have before all of this, before your career in data science? Is there anything where you would say that's really the most important part?
For me personally, because of my experiences, definitely trying my best to either get out of or identifying, say, the toxic environment or the people that were toxic sooner than later. I think that would have been very helpful. And then I think maybe if I had known at the time, I could have either gotten out of the toxic environment much sooner and made more progress. I mean, there are going to be some cases where if you have a job and you just can't leave it, even though it's a toxic environment, but maybe you could do something outside of work to help yourself to deal with that. But I think that was a big thing for me. And then being able to seek out people and communities, talking to them, whether it's mentors or colleagues, you know, other people who are data scientists, whatever level they're at. I think that was been very helpful for me.
Did you compare yourself? How did you benchmark your progress? Did you compare yourself to colleagues or to people on social media, or just to yourself? What was the process there?
So again, for me personally, at the beginning, interestingly, I didn't compare myself to others, especially when I was in the toxic environment. What I would do is I would more so just look down on myself based on their negative feedback. But later, as I think I got more into, say, the positive environments, I would sometimes think, say, people who are on social media or those who are very accomplished and had, say, the longer careers, or, are very successful, sometimes I would think, oh, I don't know if I should be in this field because I don't know everything that they know. So those are kind of some of the thoughts I had at the time, and some even up until recently.
And I would like to ask you, maybe tell us a little bit of what has happened maybe in the last 6 months or maybe in the last year, because I know that you've been doing quite a lot.
So in this past about year, so 6 months, so I was definitely fortunate to find Omdena because the reason I had found it is that I always had a desire to do the data for good. And that's actually how I even got into data science myself, was that I saw that, oh, this is a field that's very interesting. And not only is it interesting for me, and I want to get these skills, is that I could make an impact and, help organizations and people with these skills. And so when I found out about Omdena, that there was a community and that everyone's trying to help each other, and there's these projects, and I can actually work hands-on with something. And as I started challenges, I'd say every single person, is very positive and encouraging and hardworking, and I think that's great. So I'm really appreciative of being in that environment, and I know that that's also helped me with my motivation to keep learning and studying as I sought out to get another job in to doing more data science, machine learning work in my own career.
Thank you, Coulsons. Before I hand it over to Joseph, is there anything else that you want to share?
I guess I would just like to share that, like you said in the beginning, this is a very broad field, and there, as time goes by, it's being slowly defined, and different parts of the pipeline are being identified, where you've got your data engineers, you have different job titles coming up now, say data scientist, analyst, machine learning engineer, et cetera. And so I think just everyone remembering that it's really hard to know everything. And maybe you could know breadth, maybe you could focus on something specific, but that regardless, there's always going to be something to learn, and you really shouldn't be afraid, like I was, to just try to dive in and do work with others, which will help you learn, increase your confidence, and even teaching others is great. It helps to reinforce your own skills, and just trying to identify if you're in a bad environment, and do your best to try to seek out those that are positive and encouraging.
Thank you very much, Coulsons. So I will hand it over to Joseph for now, and then in the end, we will have you joining the Q&A session again. So Joseph, please come in, introduce yourself. From where are you calling in?
Hello, everyone. I am Joseph Itopa Abubakar from Nigeria. I am a machine learning engineer, a junior machine learning engineer at Omdena. I have had some little experiences while at the university. That was where I came across my first challenge, in artificial intelligence, and specifically using neural networks to solve a kind of social problem, which is predicting voters turnout in Nigeria for the 2019 election, though that was in 2015 we carried out the research. So currently I work in a firm where I'm an IT person, but we also deal with lots of data because of the reports we give to UNICEF every now and then. So we are forced to gather data from several contractors across the country, analyze them, put them together, then send it to UNICEF. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And would you share a bit on your personal experiences with maybe Imposter? I also know that you wrote a great article about being an introvert and being introspective, which we will also publish soon. What is your experience with what we just discussed?
Yes,
especially as you are a beginner, right? You're entering the stage now.
Exactly. The first thing I will say is that I have never started anything easy in my life. Everything always seems difficult at the first step. I felt like, wow, will I survive this? Can I go through this? But then gradually I adapt. That is why I will say that everything Coulsons was talking about, I understand it very well because they are in line with every experience I've had. The thing is, whenever I get into an environment, two things happens whenever I get into a new environment or a new challenge. The first one is at the point I realize that my performance begins to drop. It falls back. And I will say to myself, I notice it immediately. And that's why I also commend her on the point where she mentioned awareness. I noticed it immediately. Before anyone around me tell me, Joe, your performance have dropped, I knew my performance have dropped. So the next challenge becomes, how can I overcome it? I struggle with it a lot. So I've had that in my university days. Even in Omdena, I had it my first week. I was wondering, how am I supposed to work with these people? Because I do not know what is going to happen next. I don't know how they intend to structure things. I have to immediately let myself understand that I have to learn the way things are moving. I have to be able to follow the pattern, what are the challenges, what are the problems each task is trying to solve. They are trying to solve in each problem or task, something like that. But then, I think my experience, I will say to you, I cannot tell you that at this stage in my life that imposter syndrome will stop. It will always kick in if I find myself in a new environment or in a new challenge or something like that, based on my past experiences. Yes.
That's a very interesting perspective, what you're saying, that it will kick in. And in the end, when we have these doubts coming up, this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, if we have doubts coming up, that is part of our intelligence.
I agree with you. I agree with you because sometimes we have to learn to live with some things in our life. We have to learn to agree and accommodate it that this is part of me. This is who I am. It gets to a point where you stop fighting who you are. You have to accept who you are. By accepting who you are, you'll be able to face the challenge. You'll be able to say, okay, I think this is the next step I should take. But if you do not want to accept the fact that imposter syndrome can affect you, then when it comes in, you won't be able to handle it. You won't be able to find measures to counter it. But if you know it's part of you, I used to laugh at myself. I said several times I have failed, and thank God for wonderful parents. They allow us to fail. They accommodate failure in the family. It's not that they love when their children fail, but we are trained in such a way that when we fail, they don't criticize us. They don't say, oh, you are the worst person on earth. How did we give birth to you or something like that? No. They said, okay, tell us more about how did you fail. So this gives us the confidence that, okay, we can share with someone our failures, how it comes about to be. And this also helps us to say, to understand that there could be a better way to minimize this failure in the future, or to reduce the impact of this failure in the future, or to even avoid it in the future. Yeah.
That's very interesting. You said, how did you fail, right? And what you're doing there, you change your perspective. So you go into analyzing what happened here actually. And when you do that, then it's a learning experience. And then you get into an empowered state, not in a victimized state, right? You can say, I failed, or you say, I learned. Yeah. When you say, I learned, then you get empowered. So perspective is everything. So I like this way of asking yourself, how did I fail? Not I failed, but how did I fail? Very interesting. Okay. Joseph, yeah. What tip would you give somebody who is entering the field, who might be in a similar situation? What is something that you've done where you would say that is the most powerful thing that I've done?
I think as a proud introvert and someone who also get imposter syndrome once in a while in his life, my advice to anyone who is facing a challenge or trying to get into a new setting, or who find themselves in maybe an environment like Omdena or somewhere else, job environment or something, or in data science as a field, the first thing you have to understand is you don't have to be too hard on yourself. You have to relax. And that is one thing I also have learned so much in life. Whenever I try to solve a particular problem and I couldn't find solution, I don't get too hard on myself. And I have met, don't get me wrong, I've met great software engineers, great data scientists, and they'll tell you you have to sit down 10 hours to solve a problem. You have to sit down tight and solve this particular problem. But I know they are trying to advise me. I have to also understand that I am not them and they are not me. So I have to learn to solve problem the way my body suits, accommodates solving problems. So when I try to solve a problem, the first thing I do, I try for the first 2-3 hours, I couldn't solve it, maybe during the daytime. I said, okay, I leave it. By night, I try it again. The following day, I try it again. I have done that. I spent 2 weeks solving a particular problem. But the beautiful part of it is I solved the problem. So don't get too hard on yourself trying to solve a problem. And secondly, you have to understand that you cannot know everything. As Coulsons said earlier, you can never know everything. Yes, you have to learn. Yes, you have to read. You have to study hard. You have to get ideas from so many places, but you can't know everything. So you have to free your mind to ask questions. In Omdena, I have met a lot of people from across the world, people who I knew that physically I wouldn't have been able to meet them because maybe I'll have to pay for their flight ticket to come to Nigeria to meet me, but I know I couldn't do that. I couldn't afford that. But then I have met a lot of them and I came to understand that all you need to do is table your problem. And the way you table your problem, you don't just go in, send someone a private message, I have a problem, can you solve it? No, no, no. You have to let them know the steps you've taken in solving the problem. At what point you begin to face challenges and why you need them at that point to help you if they can. I think if your problem is well structured, you are not using magic on them. You hardly have people who will resist solving your problems for you or helping you out. Even if they cannot help you out, they'll definitely connect you to someone else who can solve your problem for you. So you have to understand you can't know everything, and you have to also understand that you have to communicate. You have to talk to people about the challenges you're facing. You may not be able to do it frequently. I'm an introvert, I know what I'm saying. To talk to people might be difficult for us sometimes, but then you have to learn to understand that you start one step at a time. You try today to talk to one person about the problem. Maybe tomorrow you try 2 persons, talk to them about the same issue. And by the time you started finding a solution, you begin to see that it's not really that difficult communicating with other people. It's just that as an introvert, deep inside us, we believe that, okay, let us just reserve everything and then think it through within us and find the solution within us. And if we cannot, we try to eat ourselves out like, okay, why am I this worst in everything? So it's not really like that. It takes practice.
Yes, and that's a very important point. And as I mentioned earlier, you are writing an article about this, and we will also address that in another webinar. Being an introvert or something in between, or an extrovert, that's a very important topic. And there are many ways, many strategies to communicate more, because communication is key. Communication is key, as we've already seen sharing the experiences of Coulsons and Joseph. So Joseph, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We will invite you later again in the Q&A session, and now we will hand it over to Rosanna, and we will bring her in, and she will come with a practical exercise, right? Rosanna, can you introduce yourself real quick?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for Omdena and Michael for organizing this very interesting and important discussion. So I am originally from Brazil, but I am calling today from Germany. And I have a more than 10 years background in physics, in astrophysics more specifically. And I am one person that is changing careers. So I think this is also very important to discuss. Maybe we didn't talk so much about it yet. So in my experience with changing careers, I also faced a lot of imposter syndrome, and I could notice this very clearly because, for example, when you start a new field, like changing from a new field, you already have, for example, in my case, I already have a PhD and some years of postdoc experience in physics. And then I was already quite well established in my field. And then you have to move to a completely different field that you don't know things so well, and you are very confused and like, what is going on? I have so much to learn. I am pretty much like, I don't know, a student. And then it's very common that you have this experience that, oh my God, I actually don't know anything. And for me, this was the strongest experience that I had with, I mean, I already had this, like, it's very, unfortunately, this is a very common thing in academia, this imposter syndrome, for many reasons, because it's a very competitive and aggressive environment sometimes. So for me, this changing, by now I am a machine learning engineer at Omdena, and changing from this environment to a more collaborative environment was very crucial to me to think, okay, I actually can do this. So I actually can go from one field that might be related to data science, but it's not data science, to actually start, okay, like I will participate of this projects, I will learn many things, and to actually have this power of collaboration to learn from other people without having to think that, oh, I am a fraud, I don't know many things. And I think one important thing to talk when you are changing careers, of course, it depends on what kind of background you have, but it doesn't need to be 10 years, can be like, I don't know, 5, 2, 3, doesn't matter. But usually there's a lot of people that come from other fields to data science, because data science is a very new field and it's very interdisciplinary. So I think one important thing to fight imposter syndrome is to find out those skills that you already have. That sometimes it's not obvious to you, because like people talk about Python, or R. And okay, maybe you learn C, or maybe you learn Fortran, which was my case. But you are not starting from scratch. You know, you are not like learning to program from scratch. Same thing for data analysis. You might have done already a lot of data analysis, maybe even during your bachelor's course and in some course, you know, and then you transfer those skills that you already have and that you can identify, and this can be very helpful for you to understand that you are definitely not a fraud. You are just going to some new part of your career. That was your choice. So yeah, I don't know, should I start with the exercise?
Sure, I will share your screen now, okay? And then we can start.
So I suggested this exercise because I think it's something that is very practical to understand how to, I'll just have to put my screen.
You can share it, right? You just click on the green button in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Just have to, okay. Okay, so
we don't see it yet.
Let's see how it works.
It's in the bottom. Ah, yes. Now.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go to the exercise. And so the idea of this exercise is like you practice something that is based behavior, basically self-awareness exercise. And the idea is quite simple. You have to identify the occasions that trigger you to have this imposter syndrome experience. You have to identify the thoughts that you have, then look for evidence that what you're perceiving of reality is true or not, and what can be done. So it's a very practical, for me, it helps me a lot because it's something that everybody can do. Of course, you don't need to necessarily have like some piece of paper with you. We can just do this mentally, but it's a very good way to understand yourself. So I started with some example, very simple. We can choose whatever buzzword from data science. I chose web scraping because it's actually something that I don't know. And you can imagine like, oh, there's a situation, you're having a meeting, and you have like some very annoying colleague that is like bragging about like, oh, everything is so easy about web scraping. I can do this in 5 minutes and so on. And then what happens? Then you have this thought like, oh my God, I'm such a failure. I am working a data science project. I don't know anything about web scraping. I am, an imposter. They will find out about me, and then I'm feeling very bad. So then you look for the emotions that you have associated with this thought. So, for example, you can have some feeling of humiliation, or you feel embarrassed, like, oh my God, someone will ask me about it and I don't know, or you feel scared that people will find out that you're a failure, or some other people experience different things, as, for example, getting angry at yourself or at other people and so on. And this is very important because all this thought of identifying what situations would trigger you could be someone bragging about, could be, I don't know, you see someone explaining something so nicely and you have no idea about it. It's very important for you to identify, so you can, for example, if this is a good way to identify, as Coulsons already discussed, if you are in a toxic environment, because maybe if you are being surrounded by people that are like this, maybe you shouldn't be there. And then the problem is not you, and then it's actually the other people. But in any way, you still have these very invasive and uncomfortable thoughts and emotions that you shouldn't be having throughout your normal working day. So what you can do is to look for evidence. So for example, okay, you think that you don't know anything about web scraping. So first thing you can ask is this really true? Like, do you really don't know anything whatsoever? Or, okay, maybe I took a test, I took a course about it, but I don't have any technical, like any hands-on experience with it. But that you don't know completely. It just means that you have some notions, but you are not an expert on it. And the second question that is important to ask is this skill relevant for my actual work? Because, for example, you can be someone that is working with the modeling part of a project, or that is working with the managing of a project, and to which extent is actually so relevant that you know some very specific technique for data collection, for example. So sometimes there's also like the thing of trying to be so perfectionist, and or this idea that we already discussed, Coulsons and Joseph, about this, that you cannot know everything. So the point is, if you identify, okay, do I really don't know, or do I know a little bit, or should I know, should I not know, what you can do. And what you can do is quite simple. If your answer is yes for some of those things, like that you really don't know, or that it is relevant for your work, well, then take it into action and don't victimize, as Michael already discussed. You don't need to be like, oh my God, I don't know this thing. And then you spend so much time thinking of the things that you don't know, instead of actually doing something, taking a step in the direction of learning the things that you think that you should know. And well, if you don't need to know, or if you find out that you actually know you have some idea of what it is, but it's not so important for you, then just relax. And then there's not much to discuss about. And yeah, so that's pretty much the exercise that I want you to do. Of course, you can do this. Stop sharing my screen now. You can also do this exercise with other skills. It doesn't need to be something related to data science, of course. You can, like, I don't know, maybe you have some doubts about your skills on, I don't know, in academia or in engineering and so on. And this is very powerful because this helps you to identify your train of thoughts. And then at some point you become, as Joseph already said, it's very interesting, like this idea of hello darkness, my old friend. Like you can just become familiar with, okay, I am freaking out a bit, but well, it's just another day in my life, and you will get over it. You will survive, and everything is okay. So and then you become familiar, and then every day this happens again, it will get easier, and then in the end, you might end up not having this problem anymore.
Rosanna, thank you very much. We already have some comments. Very good example. Rosanna, thank you. This is really powerful. Indeed, it's a process, and it summarizes what we discussed before, that we have to bring awareness to it. And then we look at the emotion, we give it a name. If we give it a name, it's easier to tame it. In psychology, it's called name it to tame it. And then it's an informational piece that we can look at. And we can also go into the emotion. We can also ask ourselves, why are we experiencing this emotion? Which part of me is experiencing that? So we will learn a lot about ourselves in this process, which is an opportunity to understand ourselves better. And again, it's something good, or it's something positive when we change the perspective, because we will learn something about ourselves that will prepare us better for a future scenario that we get in. And thank you, all three of you. Thank you very much. We already have questions, so I will open the Q&A session now. And I will start with the first question of Sabina. And she's asking, how do you deal with superiors when they think that problem needs to be solved much faster than you think it takes? And how do you feel then? As imposter or something else?
Can I just jump in?
Sure.
Okay, so I think there's two sides of this. So I think that, like, to be a manager involves having good notions of how much time people need in a project. And of course, people can fail sometimes, like we are all humans. And I think it is mostly a matter of communication. And I don't think that if you come to someone and just use like logic, someone will necessarily think that, or that you have to think that you are a failure because you cannot be faster. Because there are some people that are simply not. Like I am one of them actually. Like I am not very good at being like this hands-on thing and just go and do it. But on the other hand, like in the end, both you and your manager and your team, you all want to achieve a goal. So if you come with a good explanation why things cannot be so fast, I think if you have a good explanation, probably people will listen, and that should be fine.
Somebody wants to add to this?
Oh,
Hello.
David?
Yeah, hello.
Hey, David.
Hi. How are you?
Very good. From where are you calling? You want to add to the question of Sabina?
Warsaw, Poland. David. Hello, everyone. And I just wanted to add, because I've been managing people for over 10 years, and just briefly and to the point, because it's a very good question, and these questions appear quite often with people working under many managers. And I can only say to you that if you are working with a manager who is often asking you or saying to you that this task needs or can be done or solved much faster, and he's asking it quite often, I would say that you would have a problem if you met those expectations. Then I would say you can have a problem. The point I'm trying to make is that we shouldn't be worried if we sometimes do not meet the expectations of managers, because it is not always like this manager is asking us for doing something quicker because it really needs to be done quicker. This might seem a little bit contradictory or not logical, but I can honestly say you as a manager, if a manager is asking you all the time for doing something quicker and you meet those expectations, I would say you should start worrying about relation between you and manager.
I want to add to that. Thank you, David. I want to add to this. I think also when a manager is frequently asking this question and is building up pressure, I think if you respond from a way of security, in a way that you say, well, it's a task and I want to get this task done in an effective way, and also in a way that I think I can work in the best way possible, in an environment where I can work in the best way possible. And at this point, maybe if you even have no idea how long it will take, then I think if you communicate that clearly, that just shows that you are confident in the way that you communicate what you feel and what you think, so that the expectation management between the manager and you is clear. And I think if a manager is experienced and you communicate this way, I think then this person would accept this and would see that as a strength, because you would have clear expectation management, clear communication, and that is very valuable.
Yeah, but exactly. But what I wanted also to say, let us not fear the situations when we promise sometimes and we deliver. It's just really human, and there are no supermans that always do the work perfectly. And our managers, they also on the C-level suites, yeah, CFOs, yeah, CEOs, they make mistakes, yeah, and maybe we should worry all the times we are doing the work badly, yeah, and this is also our. But if we sometimes do the work correctly and we do the correct job, yeah, and sometimes we do it bad, we just are like 99.9% of people, yeah. It's just normal to everyone. And one thing that Joseph has, I just want to allude to what Joseph has said, that that we cannot know everything, yeah. Imagine yourself if you are a person who really knows everything or almost know everything. Imagine yourself what kind of a person you are then. Because to know everything, yeah, you have to focus on the work all the time, yeah, 24/7. Imagine what kind of relations you start to having on your family and on employees in the company, yeah. You just cannot know, even if you would be able to know everything, you would be completely different person. And I mean a different person in a bad way.
It would be also a little bit less interesting, right? If we would know everything. I think not knowing everything makes life very interesting. So thank you, David. Thanks for this. I think Joseph wants to add to this.
Hello, everyone. What I needed to say is very short and brief. The first thing you have to understand is you have to separate feelings from fact. In question, where I work, I have 3 managers that I answer to. And you know what it means to answer to 3 managers. One can tell you to go left and the other will tell you to go right. And then you are stuck in between. So, and if you decide to say, I'm going left, the other one will be like, okay, now you have a collaborator, you now have a kind of party inside the company, right? So you have to be able to separate feelings from fact, table the whole problem, let them understand. You shouldn't be scared, because the worst thing that could happen in the company, the worst thing that could ever happen, trust me, is that you get fired, which cannot just come because you try to express yourself, because the manner you also express yourself matters. I am not saying you should meet your manager and be like, hey, just stop, let me talk to you. You can't do that. You have to approach him, go to his office and let him understand what you are trying to do. And that takes us to the next stage where I always advise people, especially introverts. We are not good in jumping from one tree to the other like extroverts and making noise, and people will be like, yeah, that guy is working, he's really working. No, we are not good at that. So you have to learn to structure your work. Take your pen, write it down. Then be honest with yourself. Is this task really the time, the duration they want this delivered? Is it really the exact? Is it a kind of a demanding task? Is this something that needs to be delivered immediately? You have to be sincere yourself before you think that someone is trying to hate on you. If it's something that needs to be delivered, you have to understand from the company's perspective. If you own the company, you will not want to delay a particular document for a contract. You wouldn't want to do that to yourself. So you shouldn't do that to another person. But then, if it's not something in a haste and it will take much time, I have dealt with data and I can tell you that I am someone who look at numbers every day and I look at them in details. I want to make sure there's no mistake. And at the end of the day, if there's one mistake, I want to call you and let you know that there's a mistake. How do we go about it? And you can't, some people don't like that. They just want to see results. They don't care how you go about it. And you have to be able to, okay, talk to them. Let them know the problem. Let them know how you intend to handle it and why you need more time to accomplish something. And the person was also asking us, how do we feel when such things happen? I won't lie to you. I used to feel overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed. I felt as if I am underperforming. I was out of my mind. I don't even know what is wrong with me anymore. Yes, I used to feel that. But you have to outgrow some attitude in you. You have to overcome some stage in your life. It's just like when you're a boy, you go into the bush to pluck some fruits, play in the mud. And when you become a man, you don't play in the mud anymore. No. You outgrow that stage of your life. You have to also practice to outgrow this stage of your life. Meaning, it's not every time you start feeling overwhelmed, feeling imposter. No. Separate your feeling. Drop your feeling one side. Face the fact. What is really the problem? How do we solve it? And if you manage to have some people working under you, you can also use the power of delegating jobs. Don't take the whole job on you, working 24/7 like, oh, this guy is going to make heaven if he solved all this problem. Seriously, you have to take it easy. Delegate jobs to the people under you, and they may not know everything. Put them through, tell them how to do it, and give them the task to do it. I think that's my observation.
Thanks, Joseph. I think Adamola wants to add to this.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ademola, and I'm calling from Germany. My question is to Rosanna. A minute ago, David talked about managing people, and basically what you all have been talking about is if someone is not able to meet up with a particular task or meet up in a specific situation. But what if an individual finds himself where he's always not able to meet up? Like, you are given 100 tasks, and out of those 100 tasks, you still have that feeling of not being able to meet up. Like, there are situations of people, most especially those who studied in Africa, in Nigeria. I think the standard of education there's a gap between the education you attain in Africa and what is obtainable here. So once you arrive European countries like Germany, for example, and you go into the industry to work as an architect or as an engineer or as whatever, the employer employs you based on the fact that you have a bachelor's, but he did not put into consideration that the bachelor's was not acquired in Europe. So there are some gaps, there are some differences, and the expectations could cause a lot of lapse. It could be assumed that you lied about your level of experience because the expectations are different. So the question is, how do you survive in an environment where you just feel you need to go back to school, or you feel you need to downplay your role in the organization as a, maybe you might want to, instead of being a machine learning engineer, you might feel you should be a trainee or an intern because you just feel you can't meet up. How do you handle such a situation? Thank you.
So thank you so much for this question. I think this is very important. Like this is actually something that I wanted to talk about. I think there are many topics to talk only from this question. And one of them is, you know, there is a very serious risk when you are when you experience imposter syndrome, which is not only how bad you feel in your personal life, but there is this risk of you end up being exploited by people. So I don't want to play like this victim, but it is like, I mean, as much as there are many nice and helpful mentors and managers and companies, there are some that are simply not. And for example, if you have all these doubts, for example, that I already mentioned before, like, oh, I can understand very well what you were mentioning, because, for example, I have the situation that I have a PhD, I have some years of experience as a postdoc, so I am in academia for quite some time. And then out of the blue, you are kind of like almost in kindergarten again. And then I think it's very important to work in two things. One is to identify what kind of job you want to have, what kind of, it's not only like a position, like a machine learning engineer, data scientist, whatever, but it's what kind of company, like the philosophy of your company that you want to work with. Because in the end, this is what I sometimes, for example, my former students would ask me, oh, I want to apply to this place, this professor is super famous and so on. And I would say like, yeah, but you know this person, like, I mean, it's very good that the person is very competent and so on, but how it is to work with this person. So I think this is the first question, because I can guarantee you that for the same position that you want, for the same kind of job that you want, there will be companies that you have, like, I don't know, people that just put a lot of pressure on you and they don't really care. They just want results. And there are people that actually are interested in developing their workers, because they want to keep them and because they want them to be happy to be there. So I think this is, if there are people, there are all sorts of people. There are people that deal well with this. There are people that don't. And then in the end, you just have to find your kind of work philosophy. I think this is very important. And the other thing is, as you already mentioned, there will for sure exist gaps in your, especially if you are changing for some career, or also maybe you are from the same profession, but you come, as you said, from another country. And then in the country that you are currently, people request you to have other kind of skills that you didn't learn necessarily on your study. And you just have to understand this, and you have to come to a decision, like, can I work with this in parallel, and maybe even communicate. It's not a sin to not know some specific skills. So you can say, like, can I learn? I need to know this already. And so, for example, for me, just to give an example, I have already quite some knowledge on the artificial intelligence field, but I don't have so much technical, not technical, oh my God, I always say the same, the practical experience. So for me, I decided, like, oh, I think it's too stressful for me if I have to start working somewhere and I have to learn on the go, because I know that this is something that I'm not really good at. I'm not super fast. So I decided, you know what, I will take some break for some months, and I will learn the things that I need to learn. And this is actually how I ended up in Omdena. And I am very happy to tell that I am learning all the things that I need to learn. Like, I mean, and it's actually quite fast, but it's fun. So this is something that works for me. Like, maybe you have to find your own way. Like, okay, so I have to come up with a plan. I need to learn these things. Maybe I will take some gaps.
Thank you, Rosanna. We have to be now a little bit aware about the time. We are already running over time, but I see there is a It's a very good question, and we will extend it for a few more minutes, and I will read the question, but when you give your answers, please try to keep it short from now on. So the question is, now that you have entered the data science field, what are your long-term goals 10 to 15 years down the line? Are you looking into managerial positions? Are you worried about automation affecting your job security?
I could add some thoughts to this one. So for me, I'm going to say no, I'm not worried. I think the reason is that, you know, when I look back when I started with data science, things keep changing, new things come up, discoveries and ways to do things differently and faster. So I feel that if you perhaps say focus on the fundamentals and I just try to go with the flow of what's happening, and just try not to worry about it. Because let's say something like automation, even if say automation were to be adopted, I don't think, in my opinion, that anything could replace what a human is able to do. And that is to really understand the domain, to be able to communicate with those that are actually using the results of the machine learning algorithm. Because even with a lot of hard work, things are never going to be perfect. And even if the answers that you're getting from some machine learning algorithm have great metrics, it might not be good for the business. So those are my thoughts about that I think, I mean, there's always going to be some theory to worry about, but who knows when it could happen or how. And I think there's always going to be some kind of work to do. As far as managerial, well, first for me, it's hard for me to always, I'm just the type of person to make up long-term goals. I think that every time I make long-term goals, things keep changing day by day. So I might just have maybe a rough idea, well, this would be nice or that would be nice, but you know, whatever happens, I'm just gonna keep going with the flow. And right now I could say for managerial, it's not something I'm that interested because I'm very hands-on, but I've seen that this role of being a data science manager, you can have different backgrounds. I know some that are very hands-on and still manage, and some that they're better at not being hands-on. So maybe, who knows, I might think about it later. But personally for me, not now.
Thank you, Coulson. If I want to add to that real quick, what you said going with the flow. Another way to look at it is go with opportunities and be open for opportunities and not look at things very narrowly, because as you said, things are changing, the world is changing, the workplace is changing. So we should always look for opportunities. And what you also said is the human input is very relevant. And that's something that we see in Omdena projects all the time. It's very much about communication. It's about problem solving skills. It's about self-drive. It's about really being able to work together and really creating an environment where ideas can flourish and where we feel a sense of connection. And that is very important. And it also starts always with the problem, and we have to go into the domain. We have to understand the domain. We have to identify a meaningful problem that is worth being solved. And those are things that no machine can automate. So thank you for sharing this. One more person who wants to add to this.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, David.
Well, just very quickly, because we are running out of time. Just a few words. What I wanted to say, that work is important, but do not forget about your family. Do not forget about your friends. Do not forget about various communities that work and they struggle around you. Keep contact, worry about other people. If something wrong happens to you, some people always help you. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, David. And I would say those are some very, very good closing words. So thank you all for joining. And that was a very enriching experience. Thank you all for sharing things so openly and bringing in different perspectives, because that's what it's all about, understanding each other better, understanding that we are all sitting in the same boat. And I enjoyed it very much, and I wish all of you a beautiful day, afternoon, night, wherever you are calling in from. And we see each other in the future. We will continue the webinar series. And if you want to be updated, you can follow Omdena. You can check Omdena as our homepage. You can follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. And then we see each other in one of our next sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.